were doing their work was in the fields. And if you want to tie in several different features of the artifacts, the small little minute pieces like we have in front of us here that are too small to be any kind of projectile in any effective method, they might have been used as jewelry. But we find most of them shortened and quite used, and a lot of finger polish. So I would assume that most of them were used by young girls for perforating and making holes in shell beads, and holes in leather and anything that they needed. They had the tool in their little bag, I guess, to achieve it. And when they get short and dull, as we see by most artifacts, they're still somewhat usable the way they're found today, but when they get a little short and dull, they're discarded. And that's why most tools are found today fairly intact, and yet with a lot of polish and a lot of use wear that wasn't really fully understood. They might have attributed some of the use wear or polish to hefting, but if that would be the case with most arrowheads, the polish is also in the middle section where the fingers are, and there would be no reason to heft anything in the middle if it was a projectile, obviously. So over time, and adding up all the physical evidence and all the clues that were involved, it just led me to these working theories, as I call them, because the theories actually work, and I can show with physical evidence that these artifacts are far more refined than we thought they were in the past. They weren't just flaked out to put on a shaft. There was a lot more thought process put in to have proper placement for the fingers in both directions there again. And the larger tools, they're also used on the side of the tool as a cutting tool, like the woman's tool, as they call it, the ulu from Alaska, which shows there again further physical evidence that the women were using the stone tools, because the ulu is called the woman's tool, and it is a piece of slate that's ground and polished, and they had to keep it sharp constantly. And between the ulu and the mortars and pestles and the stone beads that the woman's obviously made, I see several instances where stone tools were the handicraft of woman. And as far as I can tell, I haven't been able to determine any physical evidence at all that the men were involved in this tedious little chore of making little tedious tools for the little tedious chores they had to achieve. The men were satisfied with bone and wooden shafts for the projectiles. And most projectile types or atlatls are found with bone, and once in a while they do find some with stone points. But there again, where most stone points were refined for the fingers, we might want to study those that are tied on to some kind of a shaft and see if it was a previous finger tool that was discarded and picked up by later generations and used as a projectile. So I still feel that most projectiles of stone were previously used as finger tools and then picked up by later generations and used as projectiles. So by studying the ones that are found and tied on to a shaft, if one could study the microscopic details on there, you still might find the refinement that was made originally for the finger positions, and they're again used as a finger tool originally. So there's a lot of science that needs to be further evaluated. There's a lot of science that needs to be properly evaluated in the sense that now that we can understand all these individual clues on the artifacts, we can ascertain that these were finger tools and not projectiles. And I think we're a little bit prejudiced today, in a manner of speaking, because we were born of flight. We have airplanes and things of this nature. So when we see something that has a side notched, worked out on an arrowhead type, we just assume there again that something was tied around there for hefting, for a projectile or a knife. But there again, when we're talking about stone tools that are thousands of years old, we can't assume anything onto that artifact for modern day, we really have to go back and think about the past, from the past, and look at the physical evidence for what it has to offer, and not draw any assumptions just because something, looks like it was tied on as a projectile or has side notches. We have to, there again, evaluate why they had side notches originally. And when they were flaking out a tool originally and it had a notch or a high point, they could see the advantage of that as a push point for their finger tool jobs that they had to achieve. And that just advanced to the point where they looked like they were projectiles. But there again, the physical evidence is going to show otherwise.
Lenny, I'm wondering if you see any similarities between arrowheads and projectiles on the North American continent and maybe Africa or other continents?
Yes, I have seen some striking similarities. There are actually, when you're talking about the really small tools, there actually have some little Clovis types of tools from Africa that a similar shape, and I would assume from what I've studied in America, a similar function as well. There's such a diversity that I've actually put together a display case here showing all these finger tools that were all ground and polished and used up from drilling, where all these tips can all show use wear from drilling. And there again, you can see all the different types of different arrowhead types that are in there. So it wasn't just the biface points that were used for drills or a normal drill looking like tool that was a drill. There are also many different side notched and bases that look like a projectile type. But all these different types here are all used as drills, irregardless of the different form. And when I study the thumbnail scrapers that are uniface, is flat on one side, versus the ones in the Americas, or the bipointed that are uniface in the Americas or in Africa, the Neolithics in Africa are several thousand years old. And I guess if someone wanted to sell some artifacts that were from Africa and say they were from North Dakota, there probably wouldn't be anyone that could tell the difference because of the similarities are quite shocking, and the finger positions and the areas that are worked out to fit the fingers are pretty much all identical. So the old, very old stone technology got carried down. I see very many perforator types of tools from Morocco that are similar to what's found in Peru and also in Nevada. The perforators seem to span all three areas in pretty much identical manufacture, and there again the same features are always there, worked out to fit the fingers, polished from the fingers, and discarded when basically short enough so that the user was running the fingers into the object that they were drilling. So the similarities of the technology used and the similarities of the different shapes and types of artifacts used is so I guess just astonishing is the word I have to use, just because the finger positions are the same, and you can tell that the technology really hadn't changed for probably 30 or 40,000 years. It's just that some of the points got more refined, more fancy, and probably became sort of like wampum. They became trade items, and the more beautiful they could make them, and the more colorful material, the more they could be seen as trade items, as well as the better material they had, the longer the points would last. And they were more looking for quality of material, and if they had good color, then that would add to the value of it as well.